Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at the many facets of work that is happening at the Department of Children and Families, between our staff, the families we serve, and our community partners. My name is Jaqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for almost 30 years. And although I may be familiar with many of the topics we bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help us dispel the myths and misconceptions that can often be barriers to our work. Join us as we open our doors and invite you to have a seat at our table. Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, where we have an opportunity to shed a light on individuals in our community who are making a beautiful difference. Today, I have the honor of speaking to a true advocate and a champion for children, Deb Kelleher. Deb is the founder of the Annie C. Courtney Foundation and a nonprofit dedicated to supporting families and youth touched by the foster care system. And before launching this organization, she worked with the Department of Children and Families as the founder of the Foster Adoptive Mission. Not only has she fostered and adopted children herself, she is also deeply rooted in the child welfare community, working tirelessly to eliminate barriers for young adults with foster care histories. Deb is strong and she's brave and a hero to so many, but most recently, the Exchange Club honored her as the Blue Ribbon winner, an incredible recognition of her dedication and her impact. We are thrilled to have her here with us today on her journey with the mission of the Annie C. Courtney Foundation and what's next with her work. Let's welcome Deb to the set. Hi, Deb. So nice to have you back here on Doors to Hope and Healing. You're an old friend to the show.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, I believe this is my second time on the show. And of course, I've known you for a very long time because you are also a champion for children.
Oh, thank you.
So it is a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, I think we could spend many, many hours, endless hours, talking about our experiences together in the foster care division. But today, for viewers who may not have seen the last show that you're on, and since you were here, probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago, you've done so many amazing things as a collaborative with Department of Children and Families. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey with child welfare.
So it's what I consider to be my journey of improbability. I never envisioned this to be my life's mission when I was younger, but I ended up with some infertility, and my ex-husband and I decided that we were going to adopt from the foster care system. In 1989, we started our classes and got licensed in 1990 and ended up adopting my now 37-year-old son, who's married and lives around the corner from me, so that's always really nice. After that, the agency that licensed me approached me about teaching the pre-licensing classes with one of their social workers. I did that for 10 years and I loved it. I never ever thought I would love something like that, but I absolutely loved it, and it started me off on working in child welfare directly, running the community collaborative that you just mentioned, the Foster Adoptive Mission, and then when the opportunity presented itself, kind of morphing that into the Annie C. Courtney Foundation, which is named for my beloved grandmother.
Yeah, I mean, you really are an example of living and breathing the work that you've done with, you've adopted your son, then you were a foster parent and adoptive parent after your son. How many children have you fostered and adopted?
So I ended up adopting 2 more boys. I had a few more children than that in my home, off and on. And I also have 1 biological son. Actually, I had to drive right by his office to get here today because he is a veterinarian and he works in the area. So my 2 youngest boys are still at home with me. They are 26 and 28. My youngest will probably end up staying with me forever. He loves having his mom do his laundry, clean his clothes, do all of his cooking, and he's also on the spectrum, so I'm his best buddy. I took all of that experience and learned a lot about what kids go through, and that is why we formed Annie C. Courtney Foundation. We chose my grandmother's name because my grandmother had been a kinship caregiver She started taking care of her brothers and sisters when she was a teenager after her parents died. And she raised all of them very successfully in the 1920s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, what a beautiful legacy to have, for your grandmother, and the special relationship that you had with your grandmother. Tell us about the foundation and what made you start this organization, and how you came to really be where you are today with your mission and your values.
So, as I said, we started the agency. It was myself and my partner, Sue Plowman. Sue's moved on to do other things, but I remained with the agency. We started it because we saw a gap and wanted to be able to do something where we focused on finding families for kids in foster care, and then focused on what happens to kids who don't find families, the kids who age out of foster care. And so we began with the work that we started doing with DCF, running the community collaborative, and working on recruitment in northwestern Connecticut, and then adding lower Fairfield County to our mix. At this point now, we actually do recruitment still in those two regions mainly, but we also will go anywhere in the state to assist because the needs are everywhere. And the work with kids who've aged out. So we were located in a kind of off the beaten path road in Waterbury at first. And we still found kids finding their way to our doorsteps who didn't have anything to assist them after they aged out of care. There's one boy who particularly comes to mind who came to the door one day and had no food, no place to stay, and was hungry. And took him to McDonald's, gave him a gift card, worked with him off and on to find housing, and continued to provide him supports for food. When we brought that to the board to talk about this and the fact that this was happening to kids in Connecticut, they supported us in saying, yes, we need to start looking at housing as an issue and employment as an issue. Because the other thing that we know about our kids is that they often don't get the tools that they need while growing up in order to be employable. So they lose jobs more frequently than other kids do. And so we wanted to be able to provide them with both a safe place to live and an opportunity to learn how to be employable. So besides the work that we do with DCF now, so we've morphed our work into working primarily with DCF to help them find homes for kids in the foster care system.
Right there, can we just stop and talk about, do you have a contract with the department? How are you working with you?
Yes.
How do you interface with us?
Yes, so we do have a contract with DCF, and our contract is to provide them with full-time recruitment and to also conduct all of the English-speaking information sessions that introduce families initially to foster care in Connecticut. In fact, I just conducted one Saturday morning for 7 families.
Is that virtual or is that in person?
So we have morphed over to doing all of those virtually. So after doing them in person for well over 10 years. When the pandemic hit, we moved over to doing everything on Zoom, as everybody in the world did.
Yes.
And what we found was that we were able to include families from all parts of Connecticut in a single meeting, whereas prior to that, someone would have to physically be present in all these different towns, sometimes with no one showing up. So this became a really, really great way to get the most people in the door and to be able to have families do it from the comfort of their home. So that's what we do now. We do that I think very effectively. Every once in a while, we'll encounter somebody who is, a technophobe or really older and just not all that comfortable, but we always offer then to help them, to figure out how to get them set up, to help them, I'll talk to them about, do you have a grandchild or a child who can help you with this? And I'll walk them through what you need to do. And usually we have success with that. And so we do them all online.
I mean, you could reach so many more people and it could be so much more effective. I think, the pandemic definitely taught us about, where we can do things better and reach more people. So you have this contract with DCF to do the recruitment and the open houses. And then what else are you doing at your foundation?
So besides the work that we do with that side of the department, we also assist the systems side of the department in running meetings with the public. We call them regional advisory councils to extract information from attendees about where we need to do better, where we don't have enough supports and services in local communities, particularly some of our more rural communities in northwestern Connecticut, so that families can meet the behavioral health needs of their kids. And what we've come to find out is that sometimes that's what's preventing people from becoming foster parents when they're in, a far-reaching rural community and there's no local resources, and most kids in foster care need those resources. So we've learned a lot by doing this, and I love doing that part of the work because to me that prevention side is where we will eventually find the end of foster care, where we're able to meet families and meet their needs prior to them developing those kind of emergencies.
Yeah, and we've come such a long way with our prevention angle on the work that we're doing. And when you look back to when you first started this in the early 90s and doing the co-facilitating, where are you seeing? What are the differences that you're seeing from when you first started this and working with your families and getting people excited and passionate about stepping forward to be foster parents to now? What do you say? I know this question wasn't anything we prepared for, but it all of a sudden came to me in thinking, what have been the drastic differences in who the families and the kids were back in the early 90s and then who they are today?
It's a good question, and it's one that I actually often talk to prospective families on the phone about, because we'll get families that came to DCF for licensing in like the year 1999, and they're coming back now because they're retired, they've got time on their hands, and they're like, oh, I want to do it again. And I'll say to them, this is going to be very different from what you experienced in the past. So one of the biggest differences that I see in such a positive direction is the partnerships that we're developing between birth families and foster families and workers. Whereas when I first started doing this, every single time one of my kids came to me, the last name was blacked out and I didn't have any idea who their parents were. Now I would be starting out with having a relationship with that parent and being much more of a partner to that parent in the hopes that that child could return home. I just see that as such a profound difference in the way we treat birth families and also in the way our foster families come to learn about kids' families. Back in the 90s, when I first started doing this, those of us who came forward to be foster parents, we were kind of scared of the birth families because we were told things that made them sound like they were frightening. And now I see that so differently. I see them as folks who oftentimes just need somebody who can stand on their side and assist them in learning what they need to learn to be good parents. Let's face it, you and I are both parents. Neither of us were perfect. We made mistakes. And to have somebody there who can, coach you and be a safe place for you to ask questions, sometimes that's all somebody needs in order to be able to change their life around.
Yeah, absolutely. On this show, I've had the privilege of being able to cover the Quality Parenting Initiative and how we've, come so far in engaging the birth families with the foster families and the difference that makes for the child, and at the Olive Branch, the store that I have for DCF, which is only open to families where their children are living with them, not in foster care. But when I do have a foster mom who calls and says, can I pick up the birth parent and come shop together? That makes, a world of difference because, she's mentoring, that foster mom's mentoring the birth mom and the birth mom's teaching the foster mom what their child likes to play with. And it's a relationship that they form together. So I think I can agree with you that has been one of the most significant and drastic differences in the way the system has managed over the last 20 years, right? 20 or more years. So you've been an advocate for eliminating barriers for young adults. What are some of the biggest challenges that you think that young people are facing today?
So this is probably true for all young people today. Housing, the ability to find affordable housing when you're first starting out. And then I think for our kids, it's particularly difficult because they don't have often a safe place to land if they don't do well. For instance, if one of my kids went out and got an apartment and it didn't work out, they'd have me to come home to. But for kids who've exited foster care, they don't have that cushion. They don't have that place to go. So that's why we started looking at housing, because we wanted to make it a safer place for them, where it's not a landlord who is looking to make a profit and is going to ask them to leave at the first bump in the road, where we would be able to work with them much more closely.
What are some of the key, of your foundation? What are some of the things that you're most proud of that you're offering to families and to those youth that you're talking about?
So we just purchased 3 single-bedroom condominiums in Waterbury, a sale that I think took years off my life, but for good cause. So we're going to be, well, we've already asked our tenants to leave in the nicest of all possible ways, and we're giving them lots of time, and we're also going to give them financial assistance. And then once those condos are vacant, they're the perfect size for a young person to start out. They're only about 500 square feet, single bedroom. It's not an overwhelming, space for someone to be setting up their first home, and we will be providing housing. I have already spoken with some staff at DCF about the FYI vouchers. That's the Foster Youth to Independence vouchers that DCF holds from Housing and Urban Development. And then CHAP and CHEER. I have a meeting tomorrow with the primary private agency that holds the FYI vouchers, so that we can start looking at how we would go about providing housing with that part. We're very blessed. So we were originally looking at multifamily housing. And I spent at least a year looking at housing and houses and things that wouldn't work for us, and apartments that had 4 bedrooms, and we were only going to be renting to a single youth because we wanted to give kids a chance to learn how to be on their own.
Yeah.
And we came across this condominium association that was composed of 32 single bedroom condominiums.
Perfect.
And there were a number of them for sale, and we ended up buying 3. And now we are raising money so that as more condos become available in that condo association, we'll be able to buy them.
Oh, wow.
Our hope is, probably long after I'm done doing this, that we'll eventually own all 32 of them.
Wow.
So we're very, very excited about that.
Wow, congratulations. I
Thank
know it's been a dream that you've had spoken of many times, and to see that come to fruition. And I know that as those tenants leave and you start to, restructure those, was it 3 that you said?
Yes.
We'd love to have you come back on and talk to us about that whole process, and share with our community different ways that they can help, and talk about how those youth are thriving and what supports and services they can use while they're there.
Well, thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I have the most supportive board of directors, and that 2 of them are former foster youth. 2 of them are foster adoptive parents. And one of our gentlemen, actually, this is kind of interesting. He works for a bank, and he did it because I talked him into it. And then it turns out when his dad died, he found out that his father had been in foster care as a child, and said, now this has become more personal to me than ever.
And he didn't know that prior to his father?
No. Because,
Wow.
People back then kept secrets like that. You didn't talk about things like that back then.
It was a stigma, more so. I mean, it is still today. We're trying to lift those, but back then it was something that you didn't speak of.
Yes, so we have wonderful board members who've been very, very helpful. We've already had to replace a refrigerator in one of our units, and one of the members got it donated, and then 2 of our other members spent their Sunday moving the old refrigerator out and helping to move the new refrigerator in. So we're a team, and we're a tight team. So that's been fabulous.
As a foster and adoptive parent yourself, in your own personal experiences, and then bringing in the board, and your board having lived experience, whether it's, as a foster parent or a foster child, or really embedded in the work, how has that shaped all the work that you're doing by having, this organization and this board who they get it? Oftentimes you can be a seat filler on a board and be there to help and, serve your time. But when someone is so invested in the work because of their own lived experience and then together with yours, how do you feel that that has really shaped your advocacy moving forward to help our children and families?
So that's a good question also. So first of all, I think that one of the big things that formed my feeling about everything that we do is the fact that I really wanted my kids to have relationships with their birth families. One of my sons, it wasn't allowed back when he was adopted. So it wasn't until he was an adult that we were able to figure out where his brothers had landed after 10 years in the main foster care system. Yeah. Separated from each other too, unfortunately. And then both my other two boys, both of them, their moms died when they were quite young. So we were unable to reconnect them to their moms. But we have relationships with other people in their families, which have been very, very important to them. So that part shaped what we believe. And then, so our two youth who, they're not really youth, they're in their 30s. So
they're youth to us.
and then we also have one who was our former president, who he's not on the board anymore, but he's emceeing our next event because he still stays in touch too. They talk about their struggles, and we always go to them first when we're making decisions to say, what do you all think about this? Because they're the ones who lived it. None of us did. And even though I lived adjacent to it, it still wasn't my direct life experience like it was my kids. And so we definitely place that uppermost in our mind. It's one of the reasons why we have a grant to open a used bookstore, and we'll be using that as a training facility for kids who are exiting foster care, because we also learned through the experiences of these young adults how hard it was for them to know what to do and what not to do, and how to hold down a job, and to be given grace when they made mistakes. So all of that has played into the way that we envision moving forward with the work.
Wow, you're doing such incredible work. What would you, for someone who's watching this show now and they're thinking about being a foster parent, what do you feel is the biggest misconception that people in our community have about foster care, and what message would you want them to hear?
So the biggest misconception is what our teenagers are like. Biggest by far. I tell this to families in every single meeting that I conduct, that they hear terrible things about our teenagers because, first of all, the only time they hear about our teens on the news is when someone's done something terrible, because as we know, the news likes to go by the mantra of when it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, sensationalism.
Right? And then second, the only time they hear about our kids in TV shows is when writers are using our kids as a punchline. They are making statements like, oh, this person was in foster care as a youth, and then you can bet your bottom dollar that that person will end up being the bad guy in that particular program. They do it all the time. When I tell families this, they'll call me afterwards and they'll say, I notice it now. I hear them do that now, and it makes me angry for our kids. So we try to dispel those myths at the very first meeting by talking about some of the young people we have here in Connecticut who are just outstanding young adults who happen to have spent time in foster care as teenagers. And they are as worthy and deserving of families to love them as our little kids are.
And I know that any opportunity I have to have those youth on this show, to show our community who's watching what our kids, our teenagers are all about, I take every opportunity, because we have really great kids in our program. Whether they were in foster care or they're adopted or involved with the YAB, the Youth Advisory Board, they're just making such an impact in our society. Within Connecticut and outside of Connecticut, we have exceptional youth. We only have a few minutes, and I don't want to end our show without talking about the Exchange Club of Greater Waterbury are going to be honoring you with the Blue Ribbon Award. How did you feel when you got that telephone call?
Totally and completely shocked. I had no idea this was coming, and I'm still shocked. The woman, Kelly Cronin, who was making the decision, called me one day out of the blue and said, "Hi, Deb, it's Kelly." Now, anybody who knows Kelly Cronin knows she has a very distinctive voice.
Yes, that's all she has to say.
As soon as she said Kelly, she was like, "Do you remember me?" And I was like, "I know who you are." And she said, "Oh, I'm chairing the decision committee for our Blue Ribbon Award." And I thought, "Oh, they need somebody else on the committee." And she said, "We chose you this year." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I tell this to folks all the time, that a lot of us, including me, have a really hard time accepting honors like that, and to just be gracious and say thank you and just leave it at that. So that was what I did, and just sat there and listened to Kelly and thought, I still can't believe this. And I still can't believe it.
Well, it's real, and you are so deserving. And Kelly has been on our show, as well as Kathy Craig, to talk about the Exchange Club. And I had experience with being on the Exchange Club for a short time, and they're doing incredible work. And I know that you are definitely deserving of that honor. But before we close our show today, if anyone watching wants to learn more about being a foster or an adoptive parent for DCF, what would be their first step?
So they would call either our office or the Kid Hero line to make an inquiry. And then if you call the Kid Hero line, which is 1-888-KID-HERO, you would then end up talking to us second, because we always talk to all families who speak English. If you speak Spanish, they go directly to the department. And then you would get registered for one of our information sessions, and then you'd move on to the department. Folks can also call our office directly at 475-235-2184. You'll speak with either me or my recruiter, Tom. We'll register you for one of our sessions and get you going.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for being on. I definitely would love to have you back after you have youth filling up those condominiums in Waterbury. Is that where it's located?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great work, and you're a warrior, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you for watching Doors to Hope and Healing, and we thank Deb for sharing with us her incredible story and her continued mission with the Annie C. Courtney Foundation. Her dedication to children and families is truly inspiring. For those of you watching, if you're interested in learning more about foster care and adoption in Connecticut, please call 1-888-KID-HERO, or you can call Deb directly at the telephone number listed on the bottom of the screen. Thank you again for watching, and have a wonderful day.
Follow us on Instagram at nutmeg.tv.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!